Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Electric Vehicles 101. Excuse me while I write the presentation. Just a couple of reminders. This will be recorded for everybody, so please, no, don't fear. We will have everything ready for you by tomorrow with the presentation. Okay. Oh, my apologies. I just mislabeled this webinar. It is Electric Vehicles 101. Just so I know everyone can see my screen, can you write like hi or something, or I can see your screen in the question box? Okay. Okay. Looks like people are here and they can see me and they can see my screen. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so this is Electric Vehicles 101. I am sorry that I mislabeled this presentation. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I will be recording this, like I said, and we will have time for questions, plenty of time for questions both throughout the presentation. So if you have a question, please feel free to write it in the question box and I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. As you can tell, you are all muted, so that is the only way I can answer questions. If there is a question I'm not able to get to or just do not know the answer to, please feel free to send me a return email once I send the recording of this email to everybody and ask your question. I will do my best to get it answered by the appropriate person. And without that, here we go. Okay. So let me just introduce myself, which I didn't do. My name is Devin Gelibro, and I am the program coordinator for Green Energy Consumers. I work on the Drive Green program at Green Energy Consumers. Green Energy Consumers is a nonprofit out of both Boston and Providence, whose mission it is to harness the power of energy consumers to speed the transition to a low carbon future. We do this in a myriad of different ways. Through our advocacy and policy work is one of the big ways we do that. And another way is through our program work, which is like, for example, Drive Green, which we're here to talk about today. Other programs worth mentioning are our Green Powered program and Shave the Peak program. And if you're interested in those, I really suggest that you check out the website and learn more. So without further ado, why did we choose electric vehicles at Green Energy Consumers? Why is this something that we wanted to focus on? Well, we started the Drive Green program in late 2016, and it's a tool we use to both educate folks about electric vehicles. So when you go to the website, you'll see there's tons of information and we could hopefully answer any kind of question you might have about electric vehicles there. And that's the one main half of it. And the other half is a way for you to actually then go and buy these vehicles. So if you go through our test drive portal, you can see there that we have a ton of dealers in our network that have agreed to give fixed monthly discounts for anybody who signs up for a test drive on our website. I will stress, and I'll try to go over this with you later, but I would recommend that you sign up through the test drive portal to get these discounts, because that's the only way we can fight for you and make sure you get these discounts. So educational, and then also a way to get your butts in those electric vehicle seats. And so far, since late 2016, we've sold close to 900 cars through their program, so we're really, really proud of it. But why are EVs really so cool? So your typical gas-powered car emits 381 grams of CO2 emissions per mile in New England. That is pretty staggering. A plug-in hybrid produces 176, and a battery electric vehicle produces 96. And this last little bit is a plug for our Green Powered program, where we offset your emissions with green renewables on the grid. So essentially you are running on green power, or you're not emitting any emissions. But CO2 emissions are a leading cause of climate change. So we wanted to do our best to mitigate that, because transportation is a big contributor to CO2 emissions. Okay. And here we go, I got ahead of myself. So transportation is our biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions. The transportation emissions are not decreasing. Passenger vehicles make up 58% of our transportation emissions. I'm sure you've all seen those photos of those large cities where there once was smog, and then during COVID, when there was a lot less travel, people were seeing mountains and whatever for the first time in their cities. So it is a huge factor. And you can see here on the right-hand side in this graph that greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector are actually 42%. Okay. Okay. And then there's a public health part of it as well. So if you have an electric vehicle, and I'm talking battery electric, not a plug-in hybrid, which is basically you have a gas backup and then an electric range on top of it. So if you have a plug-in hybrid, there are no tailpipe emissions. So when you're going around town, you're not contributing to anybody getting like worse asthma symptoms or any kind of respiratory illnesses with the particulate matter coming from your tailpipe. If you have a plug-in hybrid, you're doing less so than a traditional internal combustion engine car. So we'll still take that as a win. They are cleaner, even if you take electricity generation into account. So the electricity generation in Rhode Island and Massachusetts specifically is a lot cleaner than you would think, and there are also renewable energy standards set for both states, which make it so that the electricity mix on the grid has to get cleaner and cleaner every year. So it really is getting better and better for public health and also for emissions. Like we said before, climate change itself is a public health threat. Everybody pretty much knows that. And then electrification could save New England $2.2 billion in avoided health costs by 2050, according to the American Lung Association. And that's like with health problems like asthma and other respiratory illnesses. And EVs are very, very efficient. So your typical gas-powered car converts only about 17 to 21% of the available energy in gasoline into kinetic energy or motion. And electric vehicles efficiency is closer to about 60 to 77%. So that you can see is a vast improvement, and also is more of a bang for your buck because you're not spending so much money on fueling your car, so to speak. And if you take a look at the graph we have on the right-hand side of the screen, it kind of just shows that to you. Everyone knows when you're looking to buy or lease a car, you look at the MPG or the miles per gallon. Well, electric cars have the same thing. It's just called MPGE, and it's basically the same equivalent. But if you want to just take a second to compare your traditional gas-powered cars that are very popular, like for example, the Toyota RAV4 Prime, I'm sorry, just the Toyota RAV4, it's only about 25 miles per gallon, which is not that great. You move a little bit further on the spectrum where you have like your conventional hybrids, like the Hyundai Sonata or the Toyota Prius hybrid that's without any plugs. Then it gets better. We see it goes from 41 to 52-ish. And then you get to the plug-in hybrids, and the Prius is just its own crazy example on it to itself. So it has a combined 133 miles MPGE. And then you get to the pure electric cars, and you can see on average they are greater than the plug-in hybrids and definitely the internal combustion engine cars. So really, you are saving yourself some money and then some time going to refuel, so to speak. And then overall, electric vehicles have lower fuel costs. So we have some math that we've done on our website, and it says that the average New England driver will save 3.6 cents per mile, which is equivalent to $428 a year or $36 a month. If you want to check out what that math really looks like, I encourage you to check out the website. And we did compare these numbers with the Union of Concerned Scientists. We do know that New England has pretty high electricity rates when compared to the rest of the country, but even with those high electricity rates, you will see significant savings. So on the right-hand side here, you'll see an image, and I took this from the Department of Energy's website just today, and they have something called an e-gallon. So for the state of Massachusetts, just as a marker, a regular gasoline costs about $2.74 on average today. Compare that with the e-gallon, or the equivalent to fill your car with a gallon, and that's $1.96. So you can see that as a pretty significant savings. Okay. And we really just liked this graph, so I'll just go over it with you. The annual fuel cost ranges for light-duty vehicles by technology type. So this just goes to further explain that there are lower fuel costs associated with electric vehicles. So for the annual fuel costs of all electric vehicles, you can expect to pay about $500 to $850. That's fantastic. For plug-in hybrid vehicles, it's a little bit more expensive when it caps out about $2,400. For hybrid electric vehicles, which is like a regular Prius without a plug, that can go as far as $3,250, which is a substantial jump from $850. Oops, excuse me. And then you have your gasoline-powered vehicles, and then it gets substantially larger in price, more in price, excuse me. So we just want to show you that it is cheaper fuel cost-wise to have an electric vehicle. And then there's very little maintenance and repairs that need to be done on electric vehicles in general. I've talked to a lot of EV owners over the few years that I've worked here, and they very rarely have to take their EV into the shop because there are far fewer moving parts in their EV compared to an internal combustion engine vehicle. So they maybe go in to get their tires rotated or get certain fluid, like windshield wiper fluid or whatever other types of fluids EVs still need, just topped up. But generally speaking, they don't really go in to get their car fixed. I will say that it is different if you have a plug-in hybrid, because you still have all those internal combustion engine parts, so you still would have to go in for your oil changes and whatnot, and it wouldn't cut your maintenance fees quite as much. Like we said before, battery, motor, and electronics require very little maintenance on electric vehicles. And this is something that I want to stress, because people have a lot of questions about batteries, but it is very unlikely that you'll ever have to replace the battery. The manufacturers are very confident in their product, and they know that these batteries are made to last for the entirety of life of the vehicle. So what most manufacturers do is they put an 8-year, 100,000-mile warranty on these batteries because they are confident that these batteries will last. They do degrade over time like anything, but as long as you take care of it, the degradation won't hinder you so much, and it will still last for the lifetime of the vehicle. And then regenerative braking protects your brakes. So I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with regenerative braking and what it all means, so I'm just going to take a second to dig a little bit deeper. So regenerative braking is basically when, it's associated with one pedal driving. So if you ever hear someone say they do one pedal driving, think regenerative braking. So an electric vehicle, when you take your foot off the accelerator, if you have regenerative braking on or one pedal driving on, what that will do is it will slow the car down, and at some point it will get to a stop. So it slows the car down quicker than you would if you had you took your foot off the gas in an internal combustion engine vehicle. And what that does is it makes it so you don't have to use your brakes as much, and makes it so you don't have to replace your brakes as much, but it also takes the energy from the car moving and puts it back into the battery. So it's really helpful. And then we also just, we're really excited about this consumer reports that came out about electric vehicle ownership costs. So if you really are into the nitty gritty and want to learn even more, I really encourage you to check out that consumer report. Again, so EV save big on ownership costs. So if you'll see here, the graph on the left-hand side depicts the lifetime savings from EVs versus their best-selling ICE or internal combustion engine counterparts. So a Chevy Bolt is one of the more popular cars that we sell in our program. If you want to compare that to its counterpart for internal combustion engines, that'll save you $6,000 over the total ownership cost, which is fantastic. And as you go to the longer range cars like the Tesla Model 3 and the Model Y, you'll see that those savings increase even more. We also have a point about depreciation. I will say that at first EVs were depreciating quite a bit faster than their internal combustion engine counterparts, but that is no longer the case. And particularly for Tesla vehicles, you will find that they very much retain their value. Okay. And finally, we chose EVs because they are really fun to drive. That regenerative braking or one pedal driving that I mentioned earlier, people love it and it is really fun. For someone who's motion sick or prone to motion sick like me, not so fun, but for everybody else, it's really fun and they're actually really fast and zippy, so they're quite fun to drive. And now I'm going to just stop for a second because I am sick of talking and want to answer all of your questions. Let me just pop this out. Okay, so someone asks, do you anticipate more favorable economic incentives, tax credits, et cetera, in 2022 as Biden's green agenda gains momentum? I mean, I do. I do think parts of it will definitely go through. I don't know what's going to go through. I've heard some rumblings that they're going to increase the federal tax credit. I'm really focused on whether or not they're going to change how the federal tax credit is allocated, because right now it's dependent upon your personal tax liability and not necessarily just kind of like a rebate, which is what I would prefer and I think would make it more easier for, or just easier for folks to adopt these vehicles, because not everyone has enough personal tax liability. So I'm really on the lookout for that. I've heard that that might happen. Time will tell. Okay. Let's see, someone has a question. I have always ran cars to the max miles and to the ground towards 300,000 miles. So EV batteries definitely deplete at maybe 2,000 miles. Hold on. So I'm hoping there are aftermarket ones in a couple years when my warranty runs out. She just bought a new 2016 Leaf. Congratulations. Excuse me, sorry, the question was long, so it cut off. There are definitely going to be cars with better batteries as years progress. That is why a lot of people choose to lease electric vehicles, because the technology keeps getting better every year. And I'm hoping that's what you're getting at with that question. Oh, sorry, I confused your question with somebody else's. So this one is, will there be more types of EVs on the market due to the push for all electric? What is the timing for seeing more models at a better price? So more EVs, like I said, are coming on the market every year. Technology is getting better and better. The batteries are what usually makes the price so high, and the battery prices are actually falling substantially. So you can look forward to seeing that get even better and better. And then depending on what we talked about before with the Biden administration, what they decide to do about electric vehicle tax credits, it could be more and more affordable. If you live in Massachusetts, which we'll talk about later, there is the more EV rebate also to consider. And I know that it is on the minds of many electric vehicle manufacturers to get these prices down so they can get it to everybody. Ford is particularly touting their lower prices with their new F-150 Lightning that's supposed to come out. I think the base model starts at around $40,000, but it goes up a lot from there. So who knows if that's actually going to be super affordable. Someone has a question about the Rhode Island rebates. So I started working here in 2017, and as long as I've worked here, there has been no Rhode Island rebate. There was for maybe like a year in 2015 or 16, I can't remember. But there really aren't any plans to get that up and running anytime soon. We do have policy and advocacy people working on it, but I don't think it's a priority at the moment, unfortunately. Someone's asking if companies that maxed out of the tax credit are going to be able to get those tax credits again. That is something that is mentioned in the Biden plan, but for right now, no. And I will talk about what that means more in just a little bit in a section I have about federal tax credits and rebates and things like that. So, you guys are asking very good questions. I'm running out of room. Hold on. Someone's asking a question about incentives available for upgrades to electric to support EV charging. I only can really speak to the fact that there are, we have an electric vehicle charging guide that talks about the expenses associated with that. For the unit and the installation, it should only be about $1,000 to install in your home, depending upon if you have any other issues. And there is a federal tax credit in place that will provide you some money to offset that, but you have to install it by the end of the year. Someone has a question, says, do vehicles come with a charging station to install in your home? No, but you can just plug it into any kind of socket. But there are actually some manufacturers who are selling level 2 charging stations with the vehicles as part of a promotion. I don't remember which ones are doing it off the top of my head. I think maybe Chevy. Oh my, you guys have lots of questions. All right, I will try to answer as much as I can. Someone has a question about Ford. Ford is actually doing some great things in the EV market. Like I said, with the F-150, people are extremely excited about that, and they're doing a lot of promotion about it. They also have the Mustang Mach-E, which is very popular and sold out very, very quickly with the pre-orders. So they are making headway with that. Someone's asking about public charging. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Someone's asking if we plan to offer a session on EVs with full self-driving. We don't have that technology yet, so no. Someone says, a neighbor who owns a Tesla says she has to keep it in a garage for winter because it doesn't charge well outside. So the battery does get cold, and it is easier and quicker to charge it if it is in like a warmer place, like a garage, but it will still charge, maybe just slower. People do charge these cars and live all over the world. I particularly usually reference this video we have on our website about electric vehicles in Norway, where electric vehicles are very prevalent and it is a lot colder there. So I feel like if they can do it, we can definitely do it. Someone's asking about Massachusetts rebates. We have some, I will talk about that later in the presentation. Someone's asking, will batteries become a supply problem as demand increases. The manufacturers in the supply chain are already thinking about that, and they're really trying to ramp up recycling programs. And I know, for example, Tesla is thinking about using different ways to use different minerals in their batteries, so they're not just overusing certain ones, and so we avoid those problems, at least for Tesla, so stay tuned on that. Okay, so this one is, do EVs offer less passenger protection in crash than conventional? So no, electric vehicles usually have really high safety standards, and you can go on the IIHS website if you're curious about a specific electric vehicle. Generally speaking, they have the same, if not more, protections than your traditional internal combustion engine vehicle. Another thing about them is the battery pack is at the bottom of the car, so they're lower to the ground and have better center of gravity, so they're less likely to flip. But I do encourage you to check out the IIHS safety standards, or ratings rather, for any of the particular cars that you're interested in. And with that, I think I'm going to finish. We'll get to a different part of the presentation. You guys had very great questions. Thank you so much for asking them. Give me 1 second. I will just have to organize so I don't get confused when we have our next question session. Okay. And things you should know. Okay. So I don't know if you've heard about range anxiety, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I'll explain a little bit anyways, just because it's nice to do that. So range anxiety is basically when you don't think you're going to have enough power to get to where you need to go. This is particularly prevalent in like older models a few years ago when the range wasn't so extensive on vehicles. But we like to say range anxiety is a thing of the past because of a few different factors. So one is that ranges on these vehicles keep increasing every year. So you can get anywhere from like 200 to 300 miles on your standard electric vehicle, which is fantastic and more than enough to do what you need to do, generally speaking. If you do run out of range or are close to running out of range, there are plenty of places, and there are becoming more and more places to stop and then refuel, so to speak. So there are things called charging stations, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation, but there's enough around, there's enough infrastructure that has been built that it is a lot easier to charge on the go and at greater rates. And by greater rates, I just mean faster. Another thing to consider is that if you are not ready to go full electric, that is completely okay. You can still choose something that is better for the environment or just something that you're more interested in with a plug-in hybrid. My personal favorite is the Toyota RAV4 Prime. So that one, for example, gets about 40 miles of electric range, and then it relies on the gas backup afterwards. So you can do your standard like run around, errands, whatever, on that 40 miles generally. And then if you're wanting to go on a road trip and you don't want to worry about charging stations or whatever, you still have the ability to go and do so. And it's really easy. So I do think that range anxiety is a thing of the past, and it is increasingly becoming a thing of the past. And just as an example of the battery electric vehicle, so like I said earlier, the Teslas in particular are close to around 300 miles on one electric charge. The Hyundai Kona and the Chevy Bolt are both about 250 plus, so that's really great. And then the Nissan Leaf Plus is about around 230. So it's not too bad. It's definitely doable. Okay, and here we go talking about charging. So charging, we like to say, is not as hard as you think. There are 3 basic levels, level 1, level 2, and then DC fast charging, which is also called level 3. And for level 1, which is your standard wall socket where you plug your phone in or whatever, you get 110 volts, which is 110 volts, and it gets 2 to 6 miles of range per hour. So you can theoretically just plug your car into your house if you have an external outlet. If that's not preferable, you can also do level 2, which is 220 volts, and that gets you 11 to 25 miles of range per hour. If you are a more active driver, this is really a good investment for your home because it'll make it a lot easier for you to do so, to charge your car. And typically cars are charged overnight anyways, where you have at least 8 or so more hours for your car to just sit there anyways, and it can like refuel or recharge. Level 2 charging stations are also what you can find out and about more predominantly. So if you want to charge on the go, it's either level 2 charging station or a DC fast charging station. A DC fast charging station is really fast. So depending on like the level of current and how much the car can actually take in, it can get you about 90 miles of range per hour per 30 minutes or faster. So it's all really dependent upon like how powerful the charging station is and then how much your car can actually receive. And both of those things have to match up. Both of those things have to like match up to get the max if that's what you want, but you can still charge really fast no matter what. There are things you want to know, especially when it comes to DC fast charging. But first, let's go over the plug types. So the plug types we have laid out for you on the right-hand side. They're level 1 and level 2. So those come standard with a J1772 like charging port. Then DC fast charging, it was where it gets a little complicated. So there's something called the J1772 combo that is used for DC fast charging, and that is typically found on most American and European made cars. And traditionally, Asian made cars were using the CHAdeMO for DC fast charging, which you can see what that looks like on the bottom right. But they're actually kind of switching that more and more as they're trying to get further into the American market. So with the Nissan Leaf, for example, which is an Asian-made car, they're using CHAdeMO, but they're actually, Nissan's actually coming out with a new car called the Aria, I think this year or next, and I've heard that they're actually going to do the J1772 combo, which would be better for them to get involved in this market. I'm not going to go over Tesla so much because it has its own proprietary network and port, and I think Tesla does a better job of describing that on their website, so I would encourage you to look that up. One thing, well, two things before we move on from this page. Your plug-in hybrids typically don't come equipped with DC fast charging capabilities, so just know that going into it, but they still can do level 1 and level 2. But your battery electric vehicles that you want to have DC fast charging capabilities, you need to make sure when you're buying or leasing this vehicle that it comes with that capability already installed. This is not something that you can go back and ask for them to reinstall because it has to come like made that way. So make sure when you're checking out these cars that it has DC fast charging capability if that is something that you really want, which I would suggest that you have because why not? And most EV drivers really do charge at home. There's tons of time when you're sleeping at night for your car just to plug in and charge to your wall, just to your house. Okay, so you can, like I said, you can plug it into a wall socket for level 1 charging, which is pretty slow. It's also called trickle charging. Or you can install a charging station with the help of an electrician. I would suggest that you go on Angie's List to find an electrician. They make it super easy for you on Angie's List, and they even have a little, they have a questionnaire where they ask what you want for an electrician to do, and EV charging stations is one of them. That typically costs, like I said earlier, around $1,000 if there aren't any outstanding issues, and that includes the amount of money you need for the charging station unit and the electrician's work. There is a federal tax credit available for this, and I think it's like 30% or up to up to $1,000. I would encourage you to check that out if it's something you're interested in. It is expiring at the end of the year, so you would have to have this installed in your home by December 31st in order to qualify for this tax credit. And then finally, on this page, I would suggest that you check out our electric vehicle installation guide that we wrote about last year. It's on our website and it's super helpful, and I hope that, you know, if you're thinking about it, you check it out. Okay, and you can charge on the go. Before I talk about the map, so there are a few different apps that I would suggest that you check out if you think you're going to charge on the go, or you primarily want to charge not at your home, because I do know folks who live in apartment buildings and they don't have access to charging at their home, so they just charge at public charging stations. The apps I would suggest that you check out are PlugShare. PlugShare is really great because it's crowdsourced, so if you check out any of the stations nearby, it'll tell you what condition the station is in, where it's located, like on the premises of wherever it is, if it costs any money, if there's a problem with it, so on and so forth. Then there's also ChargePoint, which is really good. And then you also, if you want to do like a road trip, I've heard a Better Route Planner is a really good resource to use, so I would check that out as well. If you're ever curious and if that's like a deciding factor for you, like road trips, I would check that out. But we screenshotted these maps from PlugShare, so you can see there's a ton of charging stations in Eastern Massachusetts, and I believe the green little blurbs are level 2 and the orange are DC fast charging. So again, these apps will tell you if there's a charge for using these charging stations, and sometimes there's not. I find that there is more there are more fees associated with charging when you're like in like highly populated areas like Boston, but Western Massachusetts, I would think that it'd be easier to find free charging. And here's an example of Southeast Mass and the Cape, and then Rhode Island. So in Rhode Island specifically, I have to update this map because this is an old screenshot, but there are a lot more charging stations now than this map shows. And there is still a big gap in the western side of the state, but there are a ton more charging stations, so it's really encouraging for Rhode Islanders. And there are purchase and lease incentives available. So specifically, we'll talk about the federal tax credit. Excuse me. So for the federal tax credit, you are eligible to get $7,500, but it depends on a few factors. So it depends on the battery size of the car. So for example, your Toyota Prius Prime gets around 26 miles of range. And it's a plug-in hybrid, and it has a smaller battery because it has a smaller range. So that's only eligible for about $4,500 in the federal tax credit. While your Hyundai Kona gets upwards of 250 miles per charge and has quite a big battery, and that's eligible for the full $7,500 federal tax credit. It's also dependent upon your personal tax liability, and I cannot stress this enough. So if you do not owe $7,500, the government is not going to write you a check, so you won't get the difference. Just, you know, figure that out when you do your taxes, if it's something that you qualify for or not. And then there is a stipulation on the federal tax credit as it currently stands, where a manufacturer can sell 200,000 vehicles as a cap, and then the federal tax credit starts to phase out. Excuse me. So for Chevy or GM and Tesla, they hit this milestone a while ago, and they already went through their phase out period. So there is no federal tax credit available to them at this time. As a way to compensate, Chevy and Tesla for a while had incredibly large discounts on their vehicles, but you will see that at least the new Chevy Bolts don't have as large of a discount. They have a very little discount compared to what they used to because they're rising in popularity, but they are still eligible for things like state rebates. And maybe in the future, depending on what the Biden administration does, they might be eligible for the federal tax credit once again. Okay, so like I said before, unfortunately, we Rhode Islanders do not have a state rebate when it comes to electric vehicles. That's just where we are, and it's unfortunate. But There it is. Massachusetts does have a state more EV rebate. So that's $2,500 rebate for a battery electric vehicle. That's just pure electric, no gas. And then a $1,500 rebate for a plug-in hybrid. There are some stipulations. The vehicle purchase price must be below $50,000 for any of these vehicles. And for the plug-in hybrid, it has to have a range of 25 miles or greater, and that's the EPA estimated range. And then there are drive green discounts to consider. So like I said before, we have built up a network of dealers that post prices to our website once a month. And they, as part of being, in order for them to be part of this program, they offer fixed monthly discounts. So if you sign up for our website, if you sign up for a test drive on our website, then you will be eligible for the discount that month at that dealer that you sign up for. And I cannot stress it enough to sign up for the test drive, because that makes you eligible for the discount. Because if you don't, I cannot fight for you, which I don't usually have to do, but sometimes I do. So just know that it is important to know, to do. Okay, I would take you through the website, but you guys asked fantastic questions, so I think I'm running out of time a little bit, and I want to make sure I can get to the rest of your questions. Okay, so how do you get an EV? Let's see if I have just a couple. Let me just see if I can share my screen just for a minute. Okay. Okay, so this is the website. I'm just going to show it to you for a minute, and this is how you can sign up for the test drive to get qualified for the discount. So if you go to learn more, you can learn anything you want to know, get any questions answered. If you go to take action, which I suggest that you do, you can learn about all the cool things we're doing. But if you want to go and buy or lease a car, you go to Explore and Shop. You'll read that and hit ready. We're going to say we want a new car. We're going to say we're from Massachusetts. Bam. So this is the first page of the test drive form. We have all the cars here where you can kind of compare them, because they all have their own cards, so to speak. So you can see what like the base MSRP is for this kind of car, if it has a federal tax credit, what's the state rebate if there is one, and what's the lowest current final drivetrain price. And then we have things like what type of car is it battery electric, is it a plug-in hybrid, what the range is, so on and so forth. And you can also filter on the left-hand side by miles, MSRP, the style of the car, whatever you can normally think of that you'd want to filter a car by. What you would do once you're ready, say you want a Bolt or a Kona and you want to compare them. So you'd select those, hit next page. Excuse me while I move something. We have some notes here, like one of them is about the Costco discount or incentive for the Bolt. We're going to pick two of the trim levels. So we'll pick the lowest ones. And then you'll hit the drop down. So you'll see the different offerings that the dealerships are offering every month. For example, we have Quirk Chevy and Copeland Chevy, and what their discounts are and what you'll pay for at the end of the day. So once you've gone through the website, once you've gone through all these deals, figured out what one works best for you, what you're interested in, you will, for example, select one or select as many as you want. Hit the complete sign up. Put your information here. What happens after that is all of your information gets sent to the dealership, so they can contact you usually within 48 hours, but you also get an email with all the dealership's information, so then you can then call them and start arranging a test drive and start the process going. But this makes it so you get this discount. So you will be all set to go and will be eligible to get this discount if you go to the dealership after you've signed up here. Let me just switch back for 1 second. Oops, excuse me. We were here. Okay. So, we're almost at the end. Oh, excuse me. And that's how you get an EV on the website. We just have some little things like what's next. So I encourage anybody who's interested in electric vehicles to join our Drive Green community group on Facebook. It is a place where people can go to talk about electric vehicles, to ask any questions, or to talk more like techie stuff about electric vehicles, really anything you want. Everybody is very willing and eager to answer questions, and it's a really great group. You can also take the pledge that your next car will be electric, and what that does is it just like lets us keep you in the loop about any great deals or just like what's going on in the EV world. We usually send like a newsletter once a quarter, and then we'll send you other things that we think might be interesting to someone who's considering electric vehicle eventually. And then you can just sign up for our newsletter, and we can tell you and keep you in the loop of everything that's going on, and also events like this, or actually in-person events, which we were going to transition to soon. So like I said before, we will send out this recording to everybody within a day or so. And now I'm going to answer whatever questions are left. One second. Okay, so someone says, do these vehicles actually get the advertised miles per charge? Generally speaking, yes. It really depends what you're doing with the car. So in the winter, your range will decrease. That is just a fact of life. The batteries are cold, so they're working on overtime to compensate for that. It is a little bit more than it would be for a traditional internal combustion engine car, but you do learn to cope with it or just make adjustments. What a lot of people recommend, especially in winter, is to precondition your car, or to put it on while it's still plugged in if you have the ability to do so and get it all warm, or just put on certain things in the car, like most EVs come with heated steering wheels and heated seats. They encourage you to do that over like blasting the heat in the cabin. The AC in the summer doesn't really do too much to the range, because the battery is warmer in the summer, so your range actually increases beyond the EPA estimated range in the summer. And but I wouldn't worry about the AC affecting that so much. But yes, it does vary, to answer your question. Okay, someone asked if icing out at public charging stations is rare or frequent. So people use the term like iced or icing out when we're referring to like an internal combustion engine vehicle parking at a charging station. I've heard it happens sometimes, but not a ton. The place where I work, it happens every so often because we have about 4 charging stations outside, but I don't think it's crazy common. I think, again, I would refer you to PlugShare, and they can tell you if the charging stations that you're interested in or would most frequently use do get iced. You can, if you really want, call the owner of the property to try to get that car towed or moved, but it does happen sometimes. Okay, so one person says, for a long trip, checking at least 2 or more charger location companies' software programs is necessary. One shows some in an area, the other nothing there. So this is not fun, but important to know. Maybe there's one that has them all. I have spoken to a few different people who use a better route planner for long road trips. actually one who just did a road trip from Massachusetts to Colorado, and another one who's done a road trip from Massachusetts to the West Coast where all the national parks are, and they've both used a better route planner and it worked out really well for them. There's actually a blog on our website about it. The person, his name is Glenn Ayers, A-Y-E-R-S. So if you want to check out our blogs, you can read about his experience using a better route planner and going on road trips. Okay. So someone says, will the Drive Green discount be extended beyond July 31st and August 2nd? So yeah, so the dealers offer discounts every month, so they change every month. That's why there is a deadline of July 31st or August 2nd, because that is when those deals expire, and then the manufacturer sends the dealerships new programs, which makes it so that the dealers can figure out new incentives to offer for the next month. So usually there's about the first week of the month is not a great time to check the website because a lot of dealers are still updating and figuring out what they can offer, and they don't always have it right away. So I would suggest that you can start checking it out in the first week, but you could definitely have more prices posted at the end of that week going into the next week. What about Volvos? Volvos, there's just not any inventory right now, and they don't have a lot out, but as soon as there's more vehicles out and they have more inventory, we plan on recruiting them to be part of the program. Someone has a question about SUV vehicles and the size of them and becoming more available. Yes, manufacturers realize that they have to meet customers where they are, and where customers are is they want trucks and SUVs. So there are more and more coming out. If you want one and want to look at one now, I think one of the more popular ones that just came out this year is the Volkswagen ID4, which is a pretty big size, a pretty decent size SUV. If you want a plug-in hybrid, the Mitsubishi has a car called the Outlander, but that gets about 22 miles per charge, whereas the Volkswagen ID4 is pure electric and gets closer to around 300. I think it's less than 300, but it's close. Okay, does the Kona Electric use a standard level 2 charging? Does it have a level 3 charging? So all cars come equipped with level 1 and level 2 charging capabilities. I believe the Kona should come standard with the DC fast charging or level 3, but it is something that I would encourage you to double check with the dealer. So when you're at the dealer, make sure that you do have the plug that's necessary for the DC fast charging. And the follow-up is, will the VW ID4 be in your program? We are working very hard on that. The issue with that is that they sell out so quick that it's hard to get them in the program. The dealers have no incentive to want to be in the program because they don't have to do anything to sell them right now. So once there's more stock and all the backlog of folks who really want them, have already ordered them, get them, I think we will be having the ID4 on our website. I don't know approximately when that will be, but we will be checking on this as time continues. Let's check the time. Okay, so we have a few more minutes. Does anybody have any more questions before we sign off? Okay. Someone has a question. If my car is too far from an outlet for the included charger cable to reach, say for Chevy Bolt, will it charge properly with an extension cord? I think it could if you were using the level 1 capability, but I would just make sure you don't have any kind of tripping hazards. Someone says, what is the residual value of a car when you lease it? It depends upon the car and the deal that you had with the dealership and the original price point of the car. Okay. All right. I think that is it. Thank you so much again for joining me. I hope that I answered all of your questions and you learned a lot about electric vehicles today. I will be sending the recording out within a day or so, as soon as I can. And then you can feel free to ask me any additional questions should any arise. But with that, thank you so much. And I look forward to you attending future events with us.